On one hand, we have one of the most luxurious, extravagant, and largest neighborhoods in all of Tokyo. And on the other hand, a sea of people in the famous traditional Tsukiji market. Today, we're going to see a bit of the contrasts and a few scattered stories about the Ginza area. Well, for example, here, we have a super luxurious and iconic place in Ginza, which is the Nissan Crossing. When you hear Nissan, you think of a major global car brand. It has a big rivalry with Toyota, which is the company that leads the car market in Japan. But did you know that Nissan is basically in great danger of going bankrupt? And the fact is, this isn't the first time. In around 2009, Nissan had a debt of about $20 billion, just in debts. So, what did they do? They made an alliance with Renault, which bought about 35–36% of Nissan. Renault bought it. And with that, Renault earned the right to choose the chief executive officer of Nissan in Japan. And that person was called Carlos Ghosn. I can't say it too loudly in here, but the thing is that this Carlos, a Lebanese guy, basically saved the company. From having $20 billion in debt, it went to having royalties in just 2 years. Of course, first he eliminated everything related to the seniority-based hierarchy culture that Japanese companies have. Because that's how it is. Japan rewards seniority more than individual merit. So, the longer you've been there, the more you deserve a promotion. And of course, the fact is that the exact number isn't known. But it's assumed that Nissan has many executives, many vice presidents, and decisions end up moving forward extremely slowly, due to all the bureaucracy from having so many executives in one company. From what I understand, Toyota doesn't have that many. I think there are 4 main people who make the biggest decisions. That's not the exact number, I don't know, but it's just to give you an idea. One of the big measures that Carlos Ghosn took was that he closed 5 major Nissan factories in Japan. There were 15,000 to 20,000 layoffs nationwide. And of course, he cut the budget a lot, reduced the number of suppliers, which was supposed to make things more efficient. Fewer suppliers, keeping only those who offered better prices. And that basically saved Nissan. But what happened? In 2019, Carlos Ghosn had to escape to Lebanon, where there is no extradition law to Japan. As a foreigner, he took refuge in his home country, where extradition to Japan for trial isn't possible. Trial for what? Well, for misusing Nissan's funds, the company's funds. I mean, it was said that he was committing tax fraud and personal matters, not company-related. And he was using a lot of company funds for personal expenses. I mean, yes, it was wrong. He did some really corrupt things. But in the end, he was the one who saved the company. The company was doing well, but ever since Carlos Ghosn left again, Nissan went back into danger. They brought in a Japanese chief executive officer who had previously led a Nissan branch in another country. I think he was from China. They brought him to Japan and it seemed to be fine. But this one was more democratic. He gave more decision-making space to all the general managers and vice presidents of Nissan. Carlos Ghosn handled everything himself and insisted, "No, this is how it will be done, period. I don't ask for permission. I'm the chief executive officer and my word is final." That's how the company was saved. The thing is, in Japan there's no culture of firing people. And of course, Carlos Ghosn was everything a Japanese person didn't dare to do. He made all his decisions by overriding all the other important positions. Moving away from a culture where promotion is based on seniority and everyone is a boss. Then, with the mass layoffs, which impacted many, 14, 15, even 20,000 lost jobs. But of course, that helped save the company. And that's how Nissan was able to avoid going under, and now it's always like Nissan is among the least profitable companies in Japan. I think the debt they have now has already surpassed the debt they had before Carlos Ghosn. Now let's go to a place where we have, yes, some brands that really are successful. Because you see, Japan has several brands that lately have been becoming less and less profitable, which are Panasonic, Sharp, Toshiba, and Fujitsu. Those 4 brands, for example, are among the ones that have been earning fewer royalties in recent years. On the other hand, the ones that are doing well are Sony. Sony is doing well, and then Toyota. Toyota is doing very well. They're some of the largest companies. at least among the brands I can name, and you know. But other companies are also doing well. Then there are banking brands and things like that. But the fact is, I'm still surprised that Sony is still successful. Look, because for me, Sony nowadays is basically PlayStation. Cameras. Many content creators, including myself, use Dajang Innovations. The camera I use is Dajang Innovations. I already stopped using Sony, because the problem with Sony cameras, even though they do have a very high level of quality. But honestly, man, carrying this big device to record videos when I have this. Having this, which stabilizes and has the camera, screen, everything, and an integrated microphone. That's it, I don't want this. Plus, I have to connect the adapter to this, and a separate receiver for audio and microphone. But anyway, fortunately, Sony is doing well. But Japan, let's be honest guys, Japan is a country that lately is hardly innovating in technology. Basically, the Chinese are taking over the market. I use a Chinese camera, let's see. I also use iPhone, I use an iPhone. Does anyone use a Japanese phone? Everyone uses iPhone, Samsung, Xiaomi, Chinese brands. I mean, nobody uses a Sony phone, for example, or Sharp. And that's exactly one of those problems Japan has, like, why isn't it innovating? The reality is, it's because of Japanese corporate culture. Nowadays, all the chief executive officers of all the big Japanese companies are all older people. I mean, they're all veterans and all they want is stability. And of course, when they're looking for stability, they're not looking for innovation, because innovation is tied to risk. I don't want to show the damn dog, Jordy.
But it's really nice.
I don't care, that's a lousy dog. Why should I care about this dog? This is Sony, a $2,000 pet dog. Do you call this innovation?
It can eat cyber cookies with the latest update.
Buy it! Well, you see, you're not going to buy it. You love it, but you're not going to buy it. That's the problem with Japanese brands. They don't want to innovate. Because innovating involves risk. And Japanese companies with older chief executive officers don't want to take risks. There's also the issue of not firing people and not innovating anymore. The era of innovation was back in the 80s. I always say, Japan in the 80s was living in the year 2000, and Japan in 2025 is still living in the year 2000. Basically, the reality is that Japan, even though people think, wow, a modern technological country, well, yes, there's a lot of technology. It's fine when it comes to technology, but it's no longer a country that's really innovating in recent years. Brands, in general, guys, I mean, there are always advances, but not at a level where you would say, this could explode, but worldwide. But instead, it stays mostly in the Japanese market. Nearly 60% of Japan's population uses iPhone, which is a foreign brand, just to give you an idea. I have a Citizen watch, which is a Japanese brand, but that's because I like traditional watches. Also in Spain, I think there were massive layoffs in Barcelona because of Nissan factory closures too. I don't know if that happened in Mexico as well. In many places around the world, they closed and laid off many workers from the Nissan company. I mean, Nissan really is on very, very thin ice. Let's see. And then, about 400 meters from what is Ginza, we have this market atmosphere, right? Tsukiji, which is where we are, belongs to the Chuo district, not the Ginza district. But look, it's literally 400 meters from here to what is the Ginza area. So let's look for something to eat. It's been several months, or maybe more than a year since I last came here, but it's the first time I've seen the Wagyu burger. This is definitely made very, very, very much for tourists, but I'm curious. I'm really curious. Let's see, how much does it cost? 2,500 yen. I'm not sure. This seems like a typical tourist trap. Especially the Wagyu beef you find in little markets and things like that, there's a lot of it. I forgot, but today, which is Wednesday, is the day when the most places are closed in the market. Because here they work on Saturdays and Sundays. And another thing, never come after 3 in the afternoon, because by 3 most of them are already closed. People come here at 6 in the morning. Don't ask why, but the culture of markets in Japan isn't about night markets like in many other Asian countries. Everything here happens during the day, starting early in the morning. Here down this hallway, we have some places open. This one's good. It has a bar. Well, today we're going to eat kaisenden, which is a bowl of rice with fish, and it's served with nihonshu, rice wine, which everyone knows as sake. Oh, this is so delicious.
Is it good?
It's really good. Well, let's see. This has one of my favorite parts of sushi, which would be the negatoro, which is tuna, but the soft part that is scraped off, and with different pieces of fish around it. And this dish cost about $15, more or less. It's not that bad, since in this neighborhood, eating at this market is expensive. It's very touristy, and honestly, the prices are a bit inflated. But the quality here never fails. It has squid, a bit of octopus, and salmon. Here you only see tourists. You hardly see any Japanese people. And sometimes you think they're Japanese, but actually they're Chinese. And I was still hungry, so I ordered a sushi set. I was still hungry, and I also still had a lot of nihonshu left. Drinking nihonshu without sushi felt a bit sad to me. So, well, the right way here is to place a little bit of wasabi on top. Turn it a little bit, grab it from each side, and just slightly dip the fish. Don't overdo it, eh?
Is it worth the 18 euros you paid?
Well, it's worth it, but honestly, I prefer to go to the cheap chains. There, I already know what I like, what dishes are good. And
Were you hungry, Naka?
let's see, the last piece of otoro. It melts in your mouth,
Let's say that's it.
even if you don't have teeth. At the end of the market, for example, there's this temple that was built to bring good fortune and protection to the fishermen. Makes a lot of sense. And that whole white wall you see over there is where the old market used to be, where the famous tuna auctions and all that took place. Well, that has now moved to Toyosu, which is now the central fish market of Tokyo. But keep in mind that it's useless for tourists. Don't go because, honestly, it's a total waste of time. If you want to see the auction, you have to be there at 5 in the morning. And you have to see everything tiny almost from a balcony far away. So don't go, it's not worth it. I suggest visiting the market once. But everything is honestly very expensive. But anyway, that's the only thing we're going to talk about tourism today, I think. This here is the Waco building, which is one of the most iconic buildings in Tokyo. Not only in Ginza, because it's a building that was built at the beginning of the 20th century and survived World War II. Remember, all of Tokyo was bombed in World War II, but this building survived. It's not only very iconic with the early 20th century structure of Tokyo, but also because Godzilla destroyed this building in the original 1954 movie. Because, of course, at that time, in 1954, it was the only big, impressive, important building that Tokyo had. Not counting the parliament, right? Well, inside, the building is a Seiko watch store. It has several floors, but yes, it's a boutique building with branded items. Inside, it's modernized, but outside, it's the old facade. Well, and here in Ginza, look, we're on a street that doesn't tell us much, but of course, there's a part of Ginza where, in quotes, everything that would be the Kiabakura area is hidden. I mean, the hostess clubs. Look, I type Kiabakura, and it's like this area is concentrated, right? And here they all are. And the fact is that here you can find the most expensive Kiabakura in Japan, basically. Where are they? Here, lost on different floors. Here you have the little sign that tells you the name of the place, and the fact is that... So, searching for the results on Google, I clicked the first one. And do you know how much it cost? The table service, just the use of the table, the bar one was 30,000 yen, and the table one was 40,000 yen per person. So, $200 or $300 just for using the table. Now later I checked with others and on average it was about 1 hour, around $120, which isn't cheap either. But yes, this is an area that's known for girls who work at a Kiabakura. I mean, at a hostess club in Ginza. They're girls who make really good money, who earn a lot, but of course they're top-level girls, really, really top. I've already made videos and discussed the culture club, the Kiabakura, and the host clubs, which are basically hostess bars. I mean, girls who keep you company in bars. And that's something I also find incredible about Japanese culture, that here both a man and a woman can work at night, and in one night they can earn up to $10,000. And they didn't even have to take off their clothes. I mean, they didn't have to sleep with anyone. And that's something that, for me, is incredible about Japan. It's really something that, even for me to this day, I never fully understand. How can there be people with so much money that they can actually spend it on a bottle of brandy that costs $15,000 and spend it in one night? And knowing that half goes to the place and the other half goes to the guy or the girl. And that's something I don't know how many countries in the world it can happen in, but, well, in Japan that happens. A lot. Not only in Ginza. This is just a truck advertising a kyabakura, right? It's called Jungle Tokyo Ginza, but it's a clear example of an ad for a kyabakura, a hostess club. One thing I really like about Japan is that even though we're in a wealthy neighborhood and all that, whatever you want. I really like the part of Japanese culture where they don't show off their money too much. Yes, in this neighborhood you can see luxury cars. Obviously the most expensive restaurant, boutiques and all that. But in general, the number of Japanese people I've met, and they dress like this, they wore Uniqlo clothes. I mean, or directly, or they just take public transportation. They take the train. And that's something I really like about Japan. Because Japanese people, in a way, are quite austere, I mean, they don't show off too much, and that's something I always talk about a lot with many friends. That we all have Japanese friends who are loaded with money, and we know they have a lot of money, but they go to the same grimy bars as everyone else. They're not into brand name stuff, or maybe they have it, but they're not constantly using those things, even though, and another really important thing, Japanese people don't have the custom of having servants. I mean, like the classic thing of having a lady who cleans your house or cooks for you, or a driver. It's something you see very, very, very rarely. I mean, people who have a driver and a butler and all that stuff. Usually, it tends to happen if they're already people with a lot of money, obviously, and older, who can't do everything on their own. For example, I watch Japanese television a lot. You constantly see celebrities on talk shows where they talk about everyday things, like different topics, like cleaning, taking care of the kids, shopping, and similar tasks, problems with everyday life with public transportation. You realize that celebrities in Japan are completely ordinary people, just with a lot of money. And that's something I really like about Japanese culture in general. There are always exceptions. It's not for nothing. There are a lot of luxurious buildings around this area, right? But generally speaking, especially if we compare it with some Latin American countries, where it's common to have house cleaners and chauffeurs. In comparison, Japan has very little of that. This is a 4-story toy store, and it's my first time inside. But since my wife's father worked at an important bank in this neighborhood, in the Ginza district. In fact, he and his wife met in the same Ginza district. She told me that her father always bought her birthday gifts and all those things here. And the truth is, it's a pretty big and very diverse toy store. Look at the Ultraman action figures. This is where wealthy parents are supposed to come to buy their kids luxurious toys. I assume this has been happening since the 80s or 90s. It's like this toy store was probably very iconic because it had everything, all the latest new toys, You see, the Ginza neighborhood didn't just become the wealthy district by chance, I mean, even since the 19th century, at the end of the 19th century, the imperial court had decided that near the imperial palace there should be an area with luxury shops. And there they looked for the richest merchants, the biggest brands that existed at that time. And they proposed that they all set up in Ginza, in this neighborhood. And that obviously made property in this whole area extremely expensive nowadays. Look at this watch shop. A year and a half or 2 years ago, there was a news story about a group of young guys. There were 3, I think, or maybe 2, who went into that store. They were masked with some bags and had an iron bar. They started breaking the glass where the watches were, obviously Rolex and so on, really expensive ones, and began putting them all into bags. And outside they came out. They were here. There was a car here waiting for them, and it was broad daylight. People were filming from outside and showed how they escaped, got into the car, and left. And what happened? The car's license plate number was visible. Before nightfall, they caught them all. Then the trial took place. On the news, their faces were never revealed, but basically, they were between 19 and 21 years old. Something like that. The 3 or 4 involved in the robbery. But look, here there's a whole Balenciaga building, a whole Dior building over there. Then we have 2 Vuitton buildings, and the Bulgari one. The thing is, a lot of people compare this avenue to Fifth Avenue in New York, which I haven't been to, but people who know it tell me that it's very similar to that, with ultra-luxury boutiques and super expensive stores all along the avenue. And you also have other shops coming in. On the other hand, there are some stores that aren't so luxurious. But it's like saying going shopping or buying something in Ginza. It's like it always gives things a higher status. And just 2 blocks from what is the Ginza area. Look, we already have typical izakayas here. Cheap bars that are exactly the kind of places you wouldn't expect. You wouldn't care about these places since they seem ugly or old. But this is an atmosphere that Japanese people really like. They're not necessarily cheap places either, but what I meant about Japanese people and luxury is whether they have money or not. Not everyone goes to gourmet, super fancy, upscale places to eat. Instead, they really like this kind of atmosphere, which is a relaxed environment. And it's a place that any average Japanese person can access. They're not cheap, but not too expensive either. And that's something I really appreciate about this country's culture, you know. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the symbolism of Godzilla. I'm a huge fan of the first Godzilla movie, the 1954 version and Godzilla -1. The fact is that later on, Godzilla became much more childish. But the first Godzilla movie is a very tragic, very serious film and has a lot of meaning behind it. The movie basically starts with a typhoon where people were losing their homes. And after the typhoon, they noticed there was radiation in the water remains and that the fishermen, the people who were fishing, had no catch because the fish were dead. Basically, that typhoon had been caused by Godzilla from the sea. So typhoon, radiation, famine. Then, when Godzilla reaches land, his giant footsteps were like earthquakes. When he reaches the city, the army mobilizes. It's the closest thing to calling it a war, and obviously all the fires he was causing the disasters from Godzilla himself. So Godzilla was the representation of all the types of disasters that Japan could have suffered up to that moment, but summed up in a monster. For example, the movie Godzilla -1. -1 gets its name because it's based on basically when World War II is ending and it takes place after the war is already over. The guy from the movie said that the movie is called -1 and not Godzilla 0 because -1 represents the situation in Tokyo in Japan. Japan, after the war, was at 0. And the only thing that could happen to it with something like Godzilla, worse than being at 0, was to be at -1. It was like the country was already in negative numbers, you know? And the fact is that Godzilla -1 is, for me, a gem of cinema, because it represents everything that the essence of Godzilla, not so much in the details about typhoons, radiation, and all that, not everything, but yes, the essence that it was a monster that was basically destroying Japan in its worst situation, at the worst moment of all. And it's the only Godzilla movie where I really like the human story, because it's basically a what would have happened if Godzilla had existed in the 50s or even the 40s. I highly recommend it. Honestly, Godzilla is a figure that, for me, is the essence of Japanese pop art, like the greatest symbol. Because after that, Godzilla opened up a lot of culture about what Japanese sci-fi is and all that kind of stuff. In the first movies, Godzilla was carrying train cars in his mouth, so it would have to be along these tracks. But something very curious is that in the first movie, even though the clock tower of the Waco building appeared, he never made it to the Imperial Palace. I think it was a very sensitive time and it was a very delicate subject to say that Godzilla arrived and destroyed the Imperial Palace, because the Imperial Palace was the only thing that survived World War II. The Americans bombed absolutely all of Tokyo, except the Imperial Palace, because the idea wasn't to kill him. He had to officially surrender, so the Imperial Palace remained intact. All the rest of Tokyo was bombed with incendiary bombs. But anyway, I hope you liked this video, another one of these, walking through neighborhoods and telling little stories. See you next time. Greetings to your family, pet, and neighbor. Bye.